Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us for our panel session today. My name is M. Waken Miller, social procurement consultant by Social Canada, and I'm going to be the moderator for this great discussion. I'm joining from the traditional lands of the Wasanich people here on what is colonially known as the Saanich Peninsula of Vancouver Island. For this panel, we're going to be talking about strong supply chains for resilient communities today. And I'm delighted to introduce our inspiring guests with us today. We have Diana Levy, Policy Development Officer of the Policy and Program Unit in the Purchasing and Materials Management Division at the City of Toronto. We also have Leslie Bellingham, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships at Raising the Roof. And we have Aytakin Mohammadi, Director of Impact and Engagement at Northcrest Developments. Thanks, three, so much for offering your time and knowledge to this space. And I'm wanting to kick us off with our first question for everybody. So we'll go Diana, Leslie, and Aytakin. For everybody, can you briefly describe one specific way your organization has used procurement or supply chain choices to support community resilience, whether through local hiring, sustainable sourcing, or partnership development? Diana, why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to start. So the City of Toronto's social procurement program, we have two pillars in our program. The first one is workforce development, and I would say that one is mostly focused on local hiring and supporting training and work-based learning and opportunities for Indigenous, Black, and equity-deserving communities. Four out of the five activities within our workforce development program are solely focused on um, employments in some form. So we have the non-construction related hiring, apprenticeship, training and work-based learning, and then other employment related activities, which focuses on participating like job fairs or resume building workshops. On the flip side, the other pillar of social procurement is really focused on sourcing, specifically more equitably, with Indigenous, Black, and diverse suppliers and social enterprises. So within the city, we do have policy requirements for divisions when they're doing their purchasing that within a certain threshold that they invite Indigenous, Black, and diverse suppliers and social enterprises to solicit a quote. And then also within the workforce development stream, we do build subcontracting requirements within our contracts. Certain contracts where it's feasible that the awarded supplier also subcontract a certain amount of the project to Indigenous, Black, and diverse suppliers and social enterprises. Um, we use our social procurement supplier list and we have it as a resource for divisions to be able to identify suppliers when they are soliciting quotes. And I will say that with the tariff situation now, we are trying to build a more resilient supply chain, a more local supply chain. So that's just a couple ways in which the city is doing so.
Thanks so much, Diana. Leslie, how about you?
Thanks, Sam. I'm Leslie from Raising the Roof. So Raising the Roof is a national charitable organization dedicated to ending and preventing homelessness. So it's a long-standing organization. You may have seen our toques, which is in itself a social enterprise. But the last 4 or 5 years, we have shifted from mainly being as a research, policy, and advocacy organization that did a lot of fundraising in support of other organizations to directly developing, owning, and operating affordable housing ourselves, and also providing services to other organizations that want to increase the supply of affordable housing with supports in their community. So it's really through this program in the last 5 years that we have but really like intricately part of our program is to not only create new housing units and preserve housing units, but also have the work of affordable housing creation go to benefit the people who most need the work. So it's really baked into our model to use social enterprise contractors as much as we can. And we've really seen the impact of that. Like over the last few years, we have created or preserved 69 units of affordable housing in a few different communities across Canada, which has really prevented and ended homelessness for 155 people who live in those homes today. But even beyond that, 155 people who, directly have been moved from homelessness into housing and having that support. It's also prevented homelessness for 261 other people through the use of social enterprise contractors who have used this hands-on trades training opportunity as a way of training people with barriers to employment in the trades. So if you can even just see those numbers, it's actually had more of an impact so far on a kind of per number per person basis through social procurement and actually having those training opportunities, those employment opportunities that have now, we've seen over the years, has resulted in long-term careers in the trades and really having that opportunity for people to have that kind of upward economic mobility and really be able to start careers in stable, high-paying trades-based jobs. So it's something we're really proud of, and it's really important to us going forward to do as much as we can to use social enterprise contractors through all the work that we do.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Leslie. Aytakin, over to you. Oh, you're muted, Aytakin.
Thank you for that. How many times we still make these mistakes, but thank you, Em. Thank you for BiSocial for having this panel. So I'm with Northcrest Developments. We're developing a large parcel of land in the Downsview area in north of Toronto. We are still a couple of years away from when construction is about to start, so we haven't really done a lot of social procurement. However, we're taking this time and, using my favorite pun, using our runway, because we got an airport going, to really prepare and do our work and due diligence to learn. We started our community engagement process, and not only with just the community, but also businesses in and around our area about 5 years ago. And since about 3 years before we even had an application into the city, to try to learn what the community wants, what the community's challenges are, what companies exist, what organizations exist, everything from nonprofits, artists, even. We do a lot of activations and programming. So we're looking at social procurement, not just for the construction of the project that we're going to build, but some of that periphery work. So our programming, our murals that we even put up, how do we source material and find artists that are local and from our target populations to ensure that the local community has access to these opportunities. And as Diana mentioned earlier on, these lists, social procurement lists, are so instrumental. And one of the challenges is there isn't a lot of these lists particularly publicly available. Some of them are kind of pay to play. Some of them that are more public are a little bit more outdated. But we see the potential that our project brings to the area. There's lots of other development that's going to be taking on. So we're taking this time to do our work and understand what companies exist. We're going to be doing surveys to engage local businesses to understand what makeup they have, what kind of businesses they operate, what kind of services they provide. There is no turnkey solution, but we recognize there's a lot of work to be done, and we're doing it right now in partnership with BiSocial and others. And I always take advantage of any opportunity that I have, like in a big panel like this, to say we're looking for good partners, everything from arts to culture to design to construction. So if anyone works with any company or small organization that you feel might be a good fit, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And I love how you've all kicked this off and how you're all working in your own spaces in this work. Diana, over to you. How is the City of Toronto embedding community-focused values like equity and sustainability into municipal purchasing? What impacts has this created?
So I will speak to the equity piece. I think there's a lot that the city can do within sustainability. However, So within social procurement, we do already have existing, like it's a common practice for us to include points for suppliers within the supplier profile space if it's an evaluated procurement, where if you are an Indigenous, Black, or diverse supplier or social enterprise, excuse me, you're awarded additional points. In addition to that, if you do have like a supply chain diversity policy or an equitable hiring policy of some sort that varies differently than what the standard regulatory requirements are, you do also do get points. However, I think one of the most exciting spaces, especially recently with the FIFA procurements that we're doing, we're piloting certain things. So if you're not aware, within social procurement, the way that the policy and program is right now was really based on the piloting that was done for Pan Am. So I think now that we're piloting for FIFA, there's potential to see like what has worked and what hasn't worked and what we can carry on into like a second phase of the social procurement program. But we've looked at or have actually started including bid discounts. So if you're an Indigenous, Black, or diverse supplier or social enterprise, and for procurements under the CFTA threshold, if we have multiple suppliers, if there's an Indigenous, Black, or diverse supplier or social enterprise, we can apply that 10% discount to their bid. And if it happens to be that they end up being the lowest supplier quoted, they get awarded. They still would get the full value of whatever they awarded. It's just this is another way of like adding equitable procurement practices to help level the playing field. In addition to that, another thing that we're piloting with FIFA is if we're able to identify 3 or more Indigenous, Black, or diverse suppliers or social enterprises within a certain space, the quotes that you solicit are limited to just those suppliers. So again, just like limiting the competition and trying to level the playing field as much as we can. So this is just one of the other ways in which we're introducing more equitable practices within our procurements.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Diana. Leslie, Raising the Roof prioritizes working with social enterprises whenever possible. What does the social enterprise sector need to be able to respond to these opportunities? And what impacts have you seen as a result of purchasing from social enterprises?
Yeah, thanks. So, the first question is interesting when thinking of, what does the social enterprise sector need to be able to respond to these opportunities? So we've done about 7 projects now, where we either exclusively worked with social enterprise contractors or mainly did. And we've really learned a lot and seen a lot for this, especially with being very clear at the front of the project on what's expected and what's needed. That even though we really prioritize using social enterprises as, like I said, a really value for us, that we've realized, especially as we do larger and more complex projects, that not every social enterprise in every area is able to do every part of the job, that we're doing sometimes small jobs, secondary suite additions, or renovations on existing building, which a lot of the social enterprise contractors that we know are part of our network are able to do well, have done excellent work for us, just as good as any other, market non-social enterprise contractor would do. So the quality of work has been excellent. But on some of the larger projects that are much more complex, have a lot more, different moving parts to them, that not every part of that job has been able to be done by social enterprise contractors. So to work with that, we have worked with general contractors that also have the same kind of social procurement mindset as us, that are able to sub to social enterprise contractors to do part of the work, even if that social enterprise isn't able to do all of the work. So like one of the examples we work with a lot is Shandos. They're a B Corp general contractor, so they're able to do some of that more complex work and coordination and sub to social enterprise contractors. So that's really worked well with us, of even having other partners in the work to be able to still, to be able to do complex work, but be able to work with different contracting groups. So that's been very useful to us, and just being really upfront, like where we're wanting to encourage the social enterprise contractors that we work with to have this as an opportunity to level up the work that they're doing, and having patient partners like us buying services for them. So I think if you're buying, to maybe have a little more patience, and being able to have these conversations and be honest and upfront before starting the project. But really, yeah, having to have that real balance of, we are a charity. We are trying to be very like fiscally responsible with the charitable donations that have been invested with us. And so having things still have to be on time and on code and on budget. But, having that balance of, just having realistic expectations from the beginning. So I think that's some of the biggest learnings that we have. So we're doing more and more complex projects. We're really excited, in some of our next ones, that we're still able to have even greater training and trades opportunities, and work with some of our great social enterprise partners. So we're very excited to be able to continue that work. As far as some of the outcomes that we've seen, like I've already mentioned some of the stats, but it's even been able to start new social enterprise contracting groups or divisions of groups in other communities. So for example, in Sudbury, we had opportunity to develop some real estate there to add new affordable housing stock, but there was no social enterprise contracting group in Sudbury. But because we had this work, Community Builders was able to have a division of their social enterprise contracting group start in Sudbury. They were existing in the Barrie, Simcoe County area, but not in Sudbury. So they were able to use the work that we were providing for them through a variety of projects we had going on in the Sudbury area. They're able to use that work to start a new division. So that, I mean, by being able to level up and start in new areas. And I think there's real opportunity for people on this call who are looking to buy. It could even be that of, maybe other social enterprises that maybe don't exist in your city, but could, if you have that work provided for them, you could be that opportunity to start a new division, to have a partnering agency, partnering organization, a social enterprise from a different area, start a new division in your community to be able to fulfill that need and have that impact on your project.
Thanks, Leslie. Okay, Aytakin, private developers often have enormous influence over how supply chains are structured. What strategies has Northcrest used to ensure your procurement and partnerships contribute to long-term community resilience?
Thank you for the question. And, as Leslie was talking about it from a charitable perspective, it's, different industries, different sectors have different challenges and opportunities that comes with it. And one of the things in terms of the private sector, and particularly in development, is that, when we talk about community benefits in particular, capital benefits, capital agreements, they've typically been around public sector, the different levels of government engaging in community benefits agreements. Now, the private sector has always been looked to towards in regards to why are they not participating? And the mandates are a little bit different, but now it's slowly becoming more as part of a conversation. We're hearing a lot more in regard to private companies and developers participating in community benefits. As I mentioned, community engagement was a strong pillar for us. And through that, we understood the need for community benefits, particularly in areas such as us, which is a neighborhood improvement area and typically been underinvested in. This special need that as development happens, that uplift that happens in terms of the development and the money being poured into a community, ensuring that it does in fact raise all boats. Now, how to go about that's kind of the challenge, because there is no guidebook, there is no playbook here. Not to say, Buy Social does provide a lot of great advice in regards to how it's been rolled out in terms of the public sector and how could the private sector participate. And we've taken that to heart. And essentially what we're trying to do is build a sustainable and resilient pathway as it relates to not only for workforce, but also for social procurement. and recognizing the fact that community needs a seat at that table, because that's where the businesses come from. That's where the workforce comes from. And at the end of the day, they hold the knowledge of the community and understand what interests they have. Now, what we're doing as a company ourselves, we're working with the City of Toronto on our community benefits plan. And I call it plan because that's how the city describes it when it talks about the private sector. We all know, and even at the city, we know that not everyone has all the answers, but we know our project is 30 years. We got a long runway, again, with that pun, long runway to really build this and build that resilient pathway. We're building a community resource group where we're going to have different groups from different industries, as well as local community members on that group to give us advice, to give us direction, give us feedback in regards to how we're approaching this, to ensure that everyone's voices are being heard. And the fact that we can give advance notice. The biggest thing I hear from nonprofits and or other organizations is we just need a heads up on what are the jobs that are going to become available, what kind they are, what is the training required for that, what are the certifications. So other organizations or wraparound services can support their clients in getting ready for those opportunities, getting those smaller businesses and contractors ready to bid on contenders and RFPs, because that's not something everyone always has experience in. And, that's why I'm so happy that for our project, other than, the planning documents, we were able to put together a community development plan in partnership with the city that really talks about 8 pillars that was identified through our community engagement that's needed for this community to prosper as part of this development, such as access to food, housing, etc. And we know there are lots of weaknesses, but we just need to find good partners. Again, we're a development company, we know how to build, but in terms of the social impact work, we really want to partner up with nonprofits, organizations, charities that really know how to go about these initiatives, to partner up with us for us to be able to roll them out. So again, my call for anyone who's interested in participating to reach out, because we're looking for amazing people to work with us and really make sure this plan comes to fruition.
Thank you so much. Great insights from all 3 of you. That's so helpful to hear. Last question, very brief responses. We'll go Diana, Leslie, and Aytakin. What is one barrier you see stopping organizations from aligning supply chain practices with community goals, like housing stability, economic inclusion, or climate resilience? Do you have any recommendations on how that barrier can be overcome? Brief responses. Diana, you go first.
Okay, I can do that. Within the city, I can say one of the biggest barriers that I have recognized in building more economic inclusion is the fact that there's a lot of barriers impeding that relationship building with suppliers and city staff, or suppliers and like the city's awarded suppliers. And I'll give you an example, like for construction, which is 55% of the city spend. The city has a requirement that when you are bidding, that you already have the names of all your subcontractors as part of your bid. Very, very, very difficult afterward to like switch them around or switch to someone else, especially because that affects the I guess the quote or your bid value or bid dollar amount. So essentially, if you don't have those relationships with Indigenous, Black, or diverse suppliers or social enterprises within the construction space, you're not aware of who they are, you wouldn't have included them as part of your subcontractors. And then when we're doing workforce development after award and trying to figure out, okay, what's available, like what's left that you can spend on, it's compared to like the large, dollar, the meaningful spend, there's not much. So I think for us, the biggest barrier is definitely relationship building and fostering those relationships pre-bid, so that when it does come time to like, maybe quote or write a bid, that those relationships have already been established. And that goes the same way with the city staff as well, like making sure that city staff are aware of who's in the space so that they can build those relationships and include them for future procurement opportunities.
That's great. Thank you so much, Diana. Leslie, on to you.
Thanks. I think that for us, some parts that we have seen is that, it's one thing if we're in Toronto or even Winnipeg, where there are, many social enterprises, that when we've tried to work in smaller communities and other places outside of these centers of kind of social enterprise activity, that it has been difficult to find. So I think that more networking amongst the social enterprise, more training and equipping between them, having ones that are very successful, being able to train and help rise up, or even like one of the social enterprises we work with, wasn't a social enterprise when it started, but they became one. So maybe even reaching out to some private companies and seeing if they would just kind of change their practices to really be a social enterprise and include that. So I think that that's something that we've seen as a barrier in being able to do more of this work and have more of these outcomes that we're trying to ourselves encourage through this. But I know that groups, of course, like Bisocial, are essential in being able to encourage this work and be able to have that kind of collaboration across the sector.
Thank you so much. Aytakin, over to you.
I think that discussion and that the theme of collaboration is something that everyone has talked about, and that's the most important aspect. I talked about how, the public sector has always kind of been ahead of the curve here in terms of community benefits, social procurement, et cetera. And now the private sector is slowly kind of creeping its way in. And one of the things that we need to recognize is, as we all know, everything is connected, whether it's the economics of building housing, wraparound services, having good social safety nets, and a good stable environment and climate resilience. Now, all of that we know. Now, in terms of how do we ensure that all the wheels are turning at the same time and getting private sector a little bit more comfortable in terms of community benefits, my 2 cents is there needs to be a little bit more dialogue, a little bit more understanding, a little bit more education, because as we all know, and this relates to everything in the world as we see it right now, there is the misconception, the misinformation, and the fear that comes out of a lack of direct communication. And that's one of the big things that I see every time I hear is like, it feels like, the other side or the government's out to get you or is trying to add cost to it. No one has that kind of a malicious intent, but if we don't understand each other, it becomes kind of tough to have those conversations. And it's also having some of the tools and resources. You talked about lists, etc. If lists exist, people have less of a fear. So it's about engaging more in communication. And one of the things that I'm excited about is because we're undergoing a process with the community benefits plan as like the first of its kind, at least in the city of Toronto. I'm very hopeful that once successful, that could lead as a good example that it can be done. And the big thing that I'm trying to kind of relay to others is that it doesn't need to cost more and it doesn't need to add budget. And those are the two big things that, timeline, budget and timeline. Those are the two big things that most private companies are worried about just because the dollars, et cetera. But if you plan it ahead of time, if you engage ahead of time, you can build those pathways to ensure that the cost is minimal. It's just redirecting some of the funds from your traditional sources that you procure from and redirecting it to some smaller enterprises, finding opportunities to get them involved. And if you do that planning, if you engage with them and understand what tools they need to support them, it's very doable. And not only does it not add money, but sometimes they end up being cheaper. So you may even save a few dollars. So it's just about understanding, taking community engagement to a level that you actually get a good conversation going and trying pilots. Pilots are my favorite thing to do. So as an example, we're talking about our community benefits plan for the construction, but right now we recently announced Rogers Stadium, a concert venue on our site. They were going to hire a lot of part-time jobs for their food and beverage. And we said, hey, you know what? We're undergoing community benefits. We're engaging lots of employment agencies. Can we work together to see if we can support you in bringing on new staff? And they were very supportive. We held 3 days of a job fair and we hired 1,300 people on the spot. So we showed that it's so doable and it's so easy. And it was a wonderful opportunity. So an amazing pilot and hopefully first of many to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much, the three of you, Diana, Leslie, and Aytakin, for the gift of your knowledge and inspiration. I know there's probably so many light bulbs going off for participants. And if anyone is hoping to share those light bulb moments or reflections, you're welcome to for our next session. We're going to have you go into breakout rooms for this next part. And so please do share your learnings and strategies for how you yourselves currently use or could use your supply chain to create more resilient communities. Thank you again to the panelists. Such an honor to have you here. Let's get everyone into the next session.
Okay, thank you.